saints of the church, but they weren't alone. I can think of Katie Reinhardt. Katie Reinhardt, who really helped influence my development as a young man. Katie was, well, she called herself a dumb Polak, but that was just, her way of talking in life. That's the kind of person she was. She was a very humble, very neat person, but also a very brash person. She was really more German than Polish, I think, and she had that German streak about her. And she was full of sayings like, "I'm so hungry, I could eat the south end of a northbound skunk," I believe was how it went. And things like that she would always say, these little quotes that really helped influence me. And of course, she taught me how to be a good servant of Christ. And then there were my Sunday school teachers, Joan McSally, who taught me in kindergarten, Naomi Runtz, who was my 4th grade Sunday school teacher, Doris Wolf, Linda Tossing, Frank Krejci, all of whom taught me about Jesus, taught me about God, taught me about church, and taught me about faith. And you know what? I don't think I can remember a single lesson that they taught me in a single class, but I remember the scope of their influence. I remember the scope that they taught me about God's love. I remember the scope of what they taught me about being a servant of Christ. As I got a little bit older, I became a little more knowledgeable about the way the church works, search committees and councils and things like that. And there was a man who was our church council president named Elmer Fowler. When there were decisions and difficulties and rough times and conflict in our church growing up, I know all of you are familiar with conflict in churches, right? Elmer Fowler always knew the answer, and he always knew how to bring the temperature down in a room and make everybody feel like they were heard, even when he told them they were wrong. Elmer Fowler taught me a lot about how to be a church person. These are all of the saints of the church that brought me to this time and this place. And I know that all of you sitting out there have similar stories to tell about the saints of the church who have brought you to this time and this place. So what joins us all together as family? What joins us all together as God's children, no matter who we are or where we are in life's journey, no matter what church we belong to, no matter where our roots, our heritage is? What joins us together as family? Paul talks about this in the letter that, the long one that Lauren read, right? In that letter, Paul talks to us, the letter to Ephesians, about what unites us together. We are united by our faith. We are united by the faith that we share as God's children, as Christ's disciples. And Paul goes on to say that we're not just united by faith, but we are all inheritors. Now you know what it means to be an inheritor. It's something that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. You have received an inheritance. What is this inheritance that Paul is talking about in this letter? Our inheritance is the faith that we share, freely given to us by God, but also given to us by our ancestors who shared in this same faith. Our inheritance is this time and this place where we can gather together not just to sit and worship for an hour on a given day of the week, but to be open to God's wisdom moving in us and through us, and then be inspired to go out into the world and be God's hands and feet doing God's work in God's kingdom. It's a place where we can gather for praise and worship, prayers and practice, working for justice, righteousness, and shalom as God would have us do. Our inheritance in Christ is this faith family, united in faith despite our differences in political and social beliefs. Our faith and our inheritance unites us as one. But being an inheritor is not without its problems. Those of you who have gone through inheritance issues with your families or other families might know that. Certainly families struggle over inheritance issues. Most of it revolves around things. Certainly there are squabbles and deep divisions families that result from inheritance issues. Families squabble over inheritance, and certainly churches and church members squabble over their inheritance as God's children too, as servants of Christ. What does that mean? How do we live into that inheritance, and how are we going to best do what God calls us to do? But how do we, as inheritors of Christ, and not just in one church, but as God's children all over the world, how do we divide ourselves against each other? How do we manipulate the Bible and manipulate God's will to turn against one another and not fully live into the inheritance that God has given us? How do we live into inheritance or not live into it as God would have us do? The saints of the church who have gone before us, who have given us this time and this place, not just Bend Church, but this very world, all of the saints of the church are many and they are varied. And certainly some of the most wonderful saints of the church that we can think of are the saints who sat in these very pews. Today is All Saints' Day, and today we celebrate those who have gone before us, those who have received the blessings of Christ's promises that we sang earlier today as we sang in our prayer response, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. I was asked about that song a couple months ago. When we sing, Jesus, remember me as you come into your kingdom, what is that about? Why do we sing that? Hasn't Jesus already come into his kingdom? We sing that to be reminded of the promises of Christ. We sing it to be reminded of the criminal that was hanging on the cross next to Christ, the criminal who said that. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. That criminal had done many things wrong in his life. To be crucified, that was the worst form of execution at the time. He had done many things wrong, apparently, but yet he had faith. He turned to Jesus as best he could and said, remember me, Jesus. And Jesus' response was not a response of judgment or retribution or you've got to check the right box before I'll let you in. Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. And as we gather around these candles representing those folks who have gone before us this week, we remember that Jesus has prepared a place for us and for our loved ones. Today we honor those who have died, and I told you a little bit about the folks at Trinity who helped raise me. But my raising wasn't done at Trinity. I certainly had a long way to go when I got here to Bend. And two of those saints who we're honoring today are Hero Schmidt and Esther Taylor. They helped raise me too. Conversations with Hero taught me a lot about faith. Hero had a bright and beautiful faith and truly believed so deeply in God's promises. And when I would have conversations with him, that opened me up as well to God's promises even further. And certainly Esther Taylor, who was an amazing woman, full of faith, full of dedication, full of energy and passion for what she believed in. I've never met people like the people that I've met here at Bend, and certainly Hero and Esther are people who are built into who I am as a person, as well as all who have gone before us, all of the saints of the church. We all have this inheritance from all of those folks who sat in these pews once before, not just Hero and Esther, but all who we can think of who have gone before us. We have inherited their faith. And it's our job to pass that faith down to others. It's been said that Christianity is only one generation away from extinction. It's our job as saints of the church. We have learned so much from those saints of the church. Now it's our job to pass that faith down to others. Pass that faith down to our children, to our youth. As I think about the folks that I knew, that I can remember as my kindergarten and first grade and second grade Sunday school teachers, will our children remember those Sunday school teachers, youth group leaders, pastors, saints of the church as well? I'm always amazed at our confirmation students. When we talk about stewardship, which means service to others and giving yourselves to God's work in the world, and I talk about people who dedicate themselves to the life of the church, Our confirmation students can always name people in this church. People like maybe Bob Landwehr, or people like Lois, or Hester, or Peggy, or others who they see doing work all over the church, who they see dedicating their lives to Christ's mission in the world. Our kids are noticing that, and we are helping to pass the faith of the next generation, pass our faith on to the next generation. This is our duty as inheritors of Christ, as inheritors of Christ's promises, to pass the faith to our kids. When I just have to mention, when at Esther's funeral, at the end of the service, I totally had no idea where this came from, but I implored people to go to church. I thought that that would be something that Esther would want to implore to people as well. I didn't plan on saying that. I don't know where those words came from. They just came out of my mouth. It wasn't me. And that's what I encourage. I encourage those words to echo as well. Esther, hero, all of those who have such a passion for the church. Let us pass that down as well. But what unites us as inheritors of the church, and that is what we hear in today's gospel lesson, the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes that we read in Luke, a little different from the ones that we hear in Matthew, but they are about taking comfort. They're about taking comfort. Blessed are those who, happy are those who, pity on those who. This isn't about necessarily happiness. They're not saying you have to be poor. They're not saying you have to be meek. They're not saying you have to be destitute. But they're asking what you take comfort in. This was Jesus' inaugural address. This was his first sermon that he really gave after being baptized, after being tempted, and then going to talk to the people. And this was what he wanted to set the course for his entire ministry by making these points. And what he was saying is, what brings you comfort and assurance? Is it the things of the world, or is it the things of God? Because the ones who take comfort in the things of God are the ones who are the inheritors of Christ. The definition of a beatitude is a state of utmost bliss. And I think the saints of the church, when they think about the work that they have done, doing God's work in the world, not just in this building, but in their lives, that's where they found their beatitudes. If we act as Christ tells us to do in the Beatitudes, we will be known as children of God. As we live into the faith of the saints of the church, all of those who have gone before us, we know that they are still with us. They are still with us in our hearts and in this place. And this wick is almost gone. When you come up from communion in just a bit, you will be doing so with candles lit representing all of those who have died in this past year, but are still alive in Christ's realm, in Christ's kingdom.